So we'll get into it now. Thank you all for coming. I'm really excited to share a little bit of what I have studied and researched about global learning pedagogies, and then engage with you all about what you think about these ideas and possibilities we might be able to imagine together for what global learning can look like here at University Estadual do Maringá. This is the last installment in a series on internationalization of education. And so for those who have been able to attend other talks, hopefully you'll find a bit of a thread, and this will be a nice ending. If this is the first talk that you have attended, hopefully also you can jump right in. They're standalone, so they're not building off of each other, but like I said, you can always go back to the YouTube. Laura, next slide, please. So we'll just be talking again for everyone, redefining what is this idea of global learning. When we want to be engaging in global learning, what are the competencies that we're looking at achieving or trying to achieve? What are some strategies for classroom practices and for evaluating those practices? We'll look at a case example from Florida International University, where I obtained my master's in international and intercultural education at their Enacting Global Learning badge. In the last talk, I explained some of the initiatives that global learning, that FIU has for global learning for global citizenship. But this will be a new one, so we'll look a little bit at what FIU does there. And then we'll move into the more theoretical, pedagogical ideas. What does community engagement look like on campuses within this idea of global learning, and how can we use feminist pedagogies to frame our orientations? Then we'll have some time to get into a Jamboard together, share some ideas, and ask questions, have a conversation. So I'm looking forward. Next slide. Thank you so much. All right, so this is a review for those who were here last week, but what is global learning? FIU, which I really appreciate their definition as clear and aspirational, but also practical. They define global learning as the process of diverse people collaboratively analyzing and addressing complex problems that transcend borders. So global learning enables every student to engage with others to find connections among divergent perspectives. This idea of a multitude of perspectives and pluralism is really important to sit in when we're thinking about global learning. The connections between those perspectives are the bedrock upon which all are able to learn to create innovative, equitable, and sustainable solutions for our interconnected human and natural communities. So, but what does that really mean, right? What are the competencies that we're looking at trying to move towards in a classroom? FIU defines 3 areas of competencies. The first is global awareness. So as you can read on the slide, students will be able to demonstrate knowledge of the interrelatedness of global, local, international, and intercultural issues, trends, and systems. The pedagogue and philosopher Ned Noddings, we'll talk a little bit more about at the end of the presentation, really emphasizes that the 3 levels, the global, national, and the local and national and global, are all very equally important to focus on when we're thinking about this idea of global learning, to really understand our own role in being global citizens, right? The second competency is global perspective. So students will be able to conduct a multi-perspective analysis of local, global, international, and intercultural problems. And the third is global engagement. Students will be able to demonstrate willingness to engage in local, global, international, and intercultural problem solving. So what are effective ways to, you can go back to the last slide. What are effective ways to reach these global learning competencies? The main tenet is that active collaborative learning strategies are imperative to global learning. Active and collaborative learning strategies versus passive sort of banking system of education pedagogies require that students make connections amongst diverse ideas. So this could be team-based or project-based learning, group projects, structured dialogues, debates, and evaluation techniques can include weekly or bi-weekly reflection papers, current event journals, site visits, reflection papers, group projects, etc. You can move on to the next slide there. So at Florida National University, one of the ways that this is integrated into the university curriculum is an Enacting Global Learning badge. So this is an undergraduate or bachelor level badge that you can add on to your major degree, and it consists of co-curricular activities designed to provide undergraduate students the opportunity to delve into global learning outside of the classroom. It aims to prepare students to understand global dynamics, so focusing on global issues and the effects of those issues on communities around the world, to develop the ability to examine complex global issues from multiple perspectives, and to take action around these issues for our collective well-being. Next slide, please. So for those who are interested in learning more about what the syllabus or the course plan for those global learning courses and other co-curricular opportunities at FIU are, feel free to email me. I'll have my email at the end. There are many, many examples of classes we also talked about in the last talk series that are able to imbue the curriculum with this global learning idea, and I'm happy to share. But now we'll move on to look more specifically at this idea of active learning. What can active learning activities look like? In the last couple of decades, the idea of community engagement has been really emerging as a significant pedagogical practice, especially within higher education, to provide opportunities for students and the university community as a whole to engage in active learning fueled by, unfortunately, usually the uncritical assumptions that service learning just in general is an effective strategy for enhancing young people's educational development. We'll get into what I mean by that a little bit more, but what is community engagement? This could be civic engagement, so opportunities in and outside the classroom that allow students to engage in this idea of civic life and improving our local communities through political and civic action. Experimental education also falls under the umbrella of community engagement. So learning through doing and having hands-on experiences like field trips or opportunities to practice different areas of knowledge. Service learning, so using community service as a way to learn about global issues. Public scholarship, which is generally defined or broadly defined as moving academia outside of just the university and into our popular culture and communities more widely. Participatory action research, which is a framework for conducting research and generating knowledge centered on the belief that those who are most impacted by the research being done should be the ones taking the lead and framing the research questions, the research design, methods, modes of analysis, etc. of such research projects. Volunteering abroad, so this is something I think we can all imagine. A traditional approach to global learning is going to another country and helping with an educational project or with building a water purification system, for example. And finally, community-based research, which is an umbrella term for research that is rooted in the community in which it's trying to ask questions and come up with solutions. So these are all, thank you. These are all different approaches to trying to have this active hands-on approach in the classroom, right? And what I mean by traditional critical approaches is sometimes this is approached from a perspective that just doing these types of pedagogical activities in and of itself is enough, and there is a good to doing it. And critical meaning there is a search for these, there is a teleology, there is an aim for these engaging in these community engaged projects to have students and the other people who are participating in the project reach a sort of shared vision of justice around whatever global issue is being interrogated. But often these still end up reproducing ideas of neo-imperialism that we're going to get into further by looking specifically at service learning. So you can go to the next slide, Laura. Thank you so much. So traditional service learning projects are by far the most commonly implemented conception of service learning. They're based on the premise that there are privileged and underprivileged people, and that those who have should give to those who are in need. This positions students as knowers and helpers and experts in the idea of the modern educational philosophy as students as autonomous, as rational, and then the folks who are helped as receiving help and not necessarily also engaging in an educational exchange because of these power dynamics. These approaches see the global citizen as one that's naturally endowed with the ability to help the other capitalized there in the sense of philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, who wrote a lot about subjectivity and ethical relations. Critiques of these approaches seek to redefinition of global citizenship beyond notions of paternalism, neo-imperialism, ethnocentrism, and uncomplicated solutions such as I'm going to take a 2-week trip to as an American to a country in the global South, and I'm going to help and learn, but that end up often reproducing the same systems they're trying to, oh, sorry about the noise, everyone. There's noise on the street. But yes, that I'm not actually engaging in the structures that create these conditions. And so these projects end up reproducing the social conditions that they're trying ostensibly to fight, right? Next slide, please. So one offer, one theory that tries to think past the limitations, even of critical approaches to community engagement projects towards global learning, is this idea of pedagogy of interruption. Biesta theorizes that learning ought not to be just about the acquisition of knowledge and skills and attitudes, but rather a project of coming into the world where the world is engaging with the other. Pedagogy of interruption sees education as an ethical project where subjectivity is shaped, interrupted, and altered in the political sphere of relations with plurality and difference. So this idea of difference is a productive and it's an indispensable force in how we are all educated both in school, out of school, and throughout our lives. This brings us back to this Levinasian idea that service learning, for example, should be repositioned not towards away from the idea of learning about the other in order to help or change the other, but towards being in a position to be taught by the other. So when we're thinking of global issues that we have in whatever matrix of power where we're situated as individuals, where we have an ability and a longing to help solve solve issues, these global issues. This idea is trying to interrupt the very easy solution to say, well, let's just have a project where we help refugees in Maringá, for example, because we know that issues of xenophobia are an issue in our community. How can we move past that to have opportunities where we're really thinking about how are we learning from the people who are experiencing this issue that we're curious about, such that we are going to allow ourselves to be changed and not just to learn on a surface level. Next slide, please. So I just want to offer a few other theoretical points. We're going to move into a more participatory, collaborative activity and discussion for the rest of the hour. Within feminist pedagogies of this idea of global learning, care and collaboration are really central to reaching the ideals that I've been talking through today. One is this idea of a feminist pedagogy of difference. How is difference, rather than seeking sameness, shaping our views of what is happening in the classroom? The idea of care and becoming global citizen carers, this comes from Nell Noddings, who I talked about earlier in the talk. I really encourage anyone to read her work and think about how this can be developed in an authentic way in the classroom. And finally, the Freirean idea of moving away from cultures of silence in the classroom. So just thinking about a passive listening and non-engagement with the issues that we experience and the issues that we see in our community, and move towards a classroom that centers dialogue and self-governance towards a shared vision of justice. This idea of a shared vision of justice where all are transformed in the process of collaborating towards finding solutions towards these complex problems. This idea, I think, really speaks to the praxis of what it means to take in multiple perspectives and move towards somewhere that we could not go alone. Next slide, please. This is a quote from Maxine Greene, who is now passed on. She was a professor at the Teachers College in Columbia University in New York, who wrote a lot about these themes, and I really, really recommend her book, Dialectic of Freedom. And I just want to offer this quote to our conversation today. Freedom, developed by human beings who have acted to make a space for themselves in the presence of others. Human beings become challengers, ready for our alternatives that include caring and community. And we shall seek, as we go, implications for emancipatory education conducted by and for those willing to take responsibility for themselves and for each other, We want to discover how to open spaces for persons in their plurality, spaces where they can become different, where they can grow. If you have any reactions, please feel free to put them in the chat. You can go to the next slide, please. Because now we will move into thinking collaboratively together a little bit through thinking through using our imagination, brainstorming what is global learning at University Estadual de Maringá. What could it be? What does it look like? In my wildest dreams, what would I want to see on campus? What questions are coming up as I'm trying to think through these possibilities? What curiosities? Is there a picture? Is there a song? Is there an image that maybe I can't find the words, but helps me, but I want to add to this vision of a global learning at that offers this pedagogy of interruption. So I'm going to drop a Jamboard into the chat. Let me know. You should be able to access it, but let me know if you cannot. And we'll just spend about 6 minutes just adding something to the Jamboard that either answers the question or that you're thinking about in this moment. It can be in English or Portuguese or any language that you're comfortable, though we might not be able to understand it if it's not English or Portuguese. All right. Well, if there are no questions, you can continue to put some in the chat as they come up. I will put on a song to help us get creative juices flowing, and let's go into the Jamboard and share ideas. There are no bad ideas. We're imagining something beyond what we've experienced. Or if you've experienced something that was really cool and you want to share it, do that too. All right, here we go, y'all. All right. So I'm going to share the Jamboard. Laura, thank you so much for your help. So we have a lot of ideas around how can culture show up on campus? Ideas, more cultural events to create more interaction among students, creating more welcoming and inclusive spaces for immigrant and folks with refugee status in our community, more virtual exchange programs across disciplines, across departments of UM, thinking about this idea of care, of emancipatory education, liberatory education, more space to talk about cultural differences, to expand access to the university, to have more collaboration maybe with universities from countries that UM doesn't have a lot of representation, more international professors, ideas of art exchanges and creating art together. All right, everyone, please feel free to put another comment in the chat or raise your hand. But we are at time, so if you need to drop, that is totally okay. Fernando says, very important debate is necessary to break the barriers regarding oneself and the other. Yes, I agree. I agree. And how we do that is, I think, always going to be a question. There's always going to be possibilities. There's always going to be difficulties. And it's really great to be able to talk to you guys a little bit about how we do that. All right, everyone. Feel free to log off slowly if you want to ask another question, but I'll close the presentation here. And I want to thank everyone again.